All right, folks, welcome back to day 4, our last day of the Southeast Regional Facilitators Workshop. Before I share what's in store for us today, I'll once again ask that I hear from you all. I'd like to know, what have you learned over the past 3 days that you didn't know before? What feelings about partnerships and event planning that you have moving forward are kind of brewing right now? So feel free to unmute yourself or share in the chat some of your initial thoughts right now in the last 3 days, what you're excited for moving forward, or any just general questions that you might have. Anything buzzing from the last 3 days? Anything you want some thought partnership on quickly? Yes, Cindy, I can absolutely share a list of attendees so you'll be able to connect with other folks from other states as well as your state. Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, so much ground's been covered, so much more ground to go. I'm glad there's some excitement in the crowd right now. All right, well, moving on. So today is going to be all about bringing together all the pieces that we've been talking about over the last 3 days. We're going to start with a virtual site visit to learn more from a producer about their farm to school sales. And then we're going to be digging deeper into the planning and outreach tools and going to get a lot of time to spend with your state teams and think about planning, outreach, and the broadly the trainer action plan. So that's what we have in store for today. But right now, we're actually going to transition into our virtual site visit for the day. So the Regional Facilitators Workshop and local producer trainings have been designed to provide experiential learning and education opportunities throughout, throughout the entire workshop for specifically designed to accommodate virtual site visits or site visits to local farms. For each regional facilitator workshop, we aim to highlight a farm in the region that's selling to schools as both an opportunity for farms to share about their work with schools, as well as to model what site visits can look like for the producer trainings that you'll be planning. So today we actually have Michelle Howe, who will be taking us on a virtual site tour of Need More Acres Farm, which is based in Scottsville, Kentucky. I'm going to first actually share my screen, and then I'll be handing it over to Michelle to lead us. Great, great. All right, Michelle, we're ready.
All right, so you just want me to start right now with the introduction?
Yeah, go ahead and just share a bit about yourself, and then we can jump into the actual presentation.
Okay, sounds good. My name is Michelle Howe. My husband Nathan and I and our 5 children, as you can see in the photo, are full-time farmers in Scottsville, Kentucky. Nathan and I actually met when we were hired by the University of Kentucky to help tobacco farmers transition to fruit and vegetable crops. And this was actually in the year 2000, so 21 years ago. A big part of the conversation when we were in our professional careers, of course, was farm to school. And so we've kind of been here through the ups and downs of that through the years. And in 2013, we decided that the best way we would be able to help other people farm full time was to become full time farmers ourselves. And so we grow on 20 acres. We are known for growing primarily fruits and vegetables year round. We do that with high tunnels. And in our area, we're able to do a lot just out in the field, even through the winter. And then we also raise beef, pork, and chicken. And I would say about 70% of our sales are to farmers market in traditional CSA, and about 30% of our sales are through farm to school programs.
Great, wonderful. All right, and you could just let me know when I need to advance in the slides.
You can go ahead and go to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually started selling to school systems. We started in Bowling Green selling watermelons. The way it happened was we were growing watermelons with a group of friends, and we were set up on the side of the road with a wagon of watermelons, which often happens with farmers when they haven't made a plan for where their sales are going to go. A food service director, Kim Simpson, with the Bowling Green City Schools, stopped. She pulled in. She said, "Hey, can I buy that wagon of watermelons for the school system?" And this was in, I think it was 2009. And ever since then, watermelons has been something that we have been focused on for procurement. It has a lot of grace out in the field, meaning we don't have to harvest it today or tomorrow, or even we can wait a week before we harvest. It has a shelf life once it's harvested, and then once it's delivered to the schools, it has a shelf life. So it's one of those crops we highly suggest farmers and school systems to consider. There's also a really good price point for schools with the watermelon. The other thing that's great about it is the kids love it. And anytime you can get food service staff, teachers getting excited about seeing the kids' face when they try a local fruit or vegetable, that's a good thing. You can go to the next slide. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm just going to be sharing sort of snapshots of the different programs that we have going on. All of these are in response to the needs of the school systems we work in. We work in Warren County, Bowling Green City, and Allen County Scottsville school systems. It might seem like we're all over the place, but really the reason why we are doing these different programs, it's because that's what the schools have asked us to do. So this is an example of the summer feeding program that we've participated in both Allen County and Scottsville. Traditionally, this looked like us selling watermelons to the summer feeding program. You'll see on the right, we have an on-farm certified kitchen. This allows us to take on some of the processing for the food service staff, which has been really huge in being able to distribute more locally grown food. And so this is an example of a snack that was given out during the summer feeding program. Next slide. We also do delivery to the Allen County Scottsville schools. You can see on the left, fresh fruits and vegetables every week for their culinary arts program. They have about 100 participants that participate in that, either in the classroom or as part of their after school program. And so that's been really huge, as we've been able to educate them on locally grown food and also help them to be procuring fresh food for that use in the classroom. On the right, you can see veggie snacks. We actually, the students in Allen County named this program. You can see in the bottom right, looks like a little bit like Superman. We called it the Super Snacks program. So the kids are trying different vegetables, particularly that we can grow in the fall, winter, and spring, which is really what we feel like we need to be focusing on as we move forward with Farm to School. That window of those really popular things like tomatoes and watermelon, squash, zucchini, sweet corn is just so limited. As soon as schools start back, the season shifts. And so really trying to get the students to try more of the unique root crops and greens that can be grown. Next slide. This was a program that came about because of COVID last year. We've really wanted to work with middle schoolers. We have had some middle schoolers come to the farm. Because of COVID, this was at a time when all the kids were online. They were doing their food choices program that was through the library, the literacy program. And they've done this program for years. And it's a program where they read a book by Michael Pollan. And what happened was when they started surveying the students started asking questions like, what if kids don't have access to this food? What if they can't afford this food? And they started asking questions that they had never asked, even though the program had been going on for about 7 or 8 years. And so they invited me to participate with them and to talk about food equity and food access, and where people who are either experiencing poverty or hunger can get access to fresh food. And then also it was a really great way for the PBT program, because everybody was on the same kind of playing field, I guess you could say. All the students qualified for PBT, and all of them could go to the farmers market and get double dollars for those programs in the Bowling Green and Scottsville area. On the left, you'll see where we actually delivered every middle schooler, after learning about local farms, local food, fresh food, accessibility and equity within farming and food systems. They all got their own bag of food delivered to them in the classroom that they got to go home and share with their families. Next slide. We also have partnerships with other organizations within Bowling Green and Allen County. The library is one of our great partners. They help us with food distribution, especially to really lower income communities. This past year, they were going out and providing Wi-Fi from the bus you can see in the picture. And that was allowing people in communities that didn't have Wi-Fi or access to computer or internet to be able to use that service. And we were also able to distribute fresh food snacks to the students. Next slide. Here are some examples of us inviting the high schoolers out. This will be the 8th year that the Allen County Scottsville high schoolers have come to the farm. It's kind of a rite of passage for all the freshmen each and every year. And it's really a great way for us to start talking about two different things. One thing is nutrition. So thinking about local food as being an avenue towards making better food choices. And the second is for people to be thinking about farming as an occupation. So we really spend a lot of time talking about not just the traditional farmer, the person on a tractor or the person planting or harvesting, but how many different layers there are in the food system and how many different job opportunities there are within the food system. Next slide. So this is an example of the Bowling Green City Schools elementary school students. We have about 2,000 students that come and visit the farm. This was a great way for us to take those snacks that they were trying in the classroom and kind of bring everything to life so they could come to the farm. What we realized is not only did some of these kids, was this their very first time being on a farm, but it really helped them to see where the food was grown. So what they were learning about in schools, they were able to actually see it. Next slide. And while the students were coming for about a year or two, I would ask them all, do you know who your farmer is? And this is them raising their hands. And they would all say, yes, you're our farmer. And it really started to sink into me that if we're going to grow the food system, we need more people seeing themselves as farmers. And so in the next slide, you'll see that we brought our friends, Ashley and Trevor from Black Soils, who's an organization that is, there you go, that is really doing some really great work, lifting up and telling encouraging messages about Black farmers across Kentucky. We brought them in so that the kids could see them and see themselves as farmers, to really expand that viewpoint of who we think can and should become farmers. Next slide. A really big partner that we have with our programs is the health department, particularly in Allen County, Scottsville. A lot of the funding that we do for our in the classroom snacks actually comes from the health department. There's state funding available for health incentives and health activities. And so we've been able to come alongside them, apply for that funding, do this, the snacks within the classroom, and then survey the students. So everyone who tries a new fruit or vegetable gets surveyed. Did you try it? Did you like it? And when you try it again. And what this allows us to do is this allows us to go to the food service staff and tell them these are the fruits and vegetables that the kids like the most. And it gives us sort of a starting place for, let's say we're going to start adding greens to salad mixes. Swiss chard is usually a very popular, as long as you cut the stem out, a very popular a vegetable for the kids. And so encouraging them to add that in. Next slide. Another thing that we've done since COVID is we were able to launch the Farming Culinary Arts and Community Organizing Co-op. We had 8 students sign up to participate in this co-op. And what the students do is they come to the farm, they learn how to farm, and it's, think about it as a community garden, but it's on our farm. So rather than me and Nathan trying to figure out how to get a tractor to the school and trying to figure out how to spend time, get our eyes on the crops and pulling the weeds, that sort of thing, we're bringing the community garden to Need More Acres, and then bringing the students here to manage it. So they are growing the food, they're harvesting it. They're also helping us with that work you're seeing in the kitchen, processing those vegetables for snacking programs. The other good thing is we're not from Allen County, we're from Bowling Green. These students are from Allen County and they know people here, they know people who are experiencing hunger, and they're able to help us bridge the gap with some of these community partners in a way that adults really wouldn't be able to. These students have weekly been taking deliveries of fresh snacks to after school programs, Community Action's Head Start program, to the school systems once they were back in session, and also local food pantries. Our local soup kitchen was shut down because of COVID, and these students were able to help us make sure that the homeless and those experiencing poverty were getting access to fresh food. The next slide. Another program that we have just started in the last year because of COVID, but I'm really excited about, is a grade recovery program. So students within the school systems that are experiencing any kind of limitation, and oftentimes maybe have fallen behind in their grades, we have started a Friday co-op program. So students are given, provided with transportation. They can come to the school, come to the farm, and they work alongside us. The program we've been doing is harvesting and processing fresh food to be delivered to elderly in the community. And as part of this, the kids get grade recovery. So meaning that if they have fallen behind in their schoolwork and taking more tests is not the solution, we can get them out here on the farm, working, learning new skills, and then they're able to get their grades up. So that was kind of just a kind of a little me sort of touching on some of the programs that we've done. Like I said, all of our programs are really in response to what the schools have asked us to provide for them.
Great, great.
Oh, and then this, I just saw this last one. I did want to mention our community partners. So in this photo, this was an event that we had on farm. We invited people in the community pre-COVID, and we've got the extension office, we've got the food service director, we've got the head nurse of the health department, we've got the director of the health department, and we have a community center director, all in that picture, and all talking about the farm to school program. I think it's so important that we're working with what could be considered non-traditional community partners in this work. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That's thank you so much for the work that you do. This was a great just overview of everything that goes on in your area and on your farm as well. Before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to just share a quick video detailing more about Need More Acres.
I think, sustainability, I think is the mindset of people that we can turn this whole thing around, all this that's happening. And I think that we're all starting to realize that we may not be able to turn it around. So why don't we try to make what we have work? Well, Nathan and I actually met. We were hired by the University of Kentucky to help tobacco farmers transition to fruit and vegetable crops, and fell in love and got married. And he continued in that job and worked in it for 12 years. And the entire time we would talk about farming full time on our own. Like, we kept thinking, if you believe in it, then we should be doing it. And we just never found the right space. And then 3 years into looking, this place came up. It has the really old house, and it was hard for them to sell, but it's like the perfect fit for us. So,
being raised on a farm in an environment that I was around, I always wanted that for my own kids, and I thought I could get away from it moving off to college, but that love of actually getting your hands dirty, being out there, it's very roller coaster. It's like from one high down to low, but I think that's part of the love of it.
I was raised by a single mom with disabilities. We were on Social Security and food stamps, and I always lived like in a food desert, so I was disconnected from my food system. My mom and she didn't have transportation, and so if when you add in the fact that grocery stores are usually miles away from people, plus not having transportation, then that puts you into a food desert. Also, I just started, as our kids got older and we lost Nathan's mom to a preventable disease, I started thinking about the food we eat, how important it is to our health, and just started realizing that I want that security for our kids. I want to have this food, and a lot of this food has just started becoming even accessible in the last few years, but we also want to make sure that it's accessible to other people, especially low-income households, and so this is a way for us to sort of have control of that and be able to provide that.
We actually started a new farmers market, which is called a community farmers market. That's the whole purpose of that name. The three families that were involved in getting that started, that was the sole purpose of it, having that community feel to it. We try to serve the higher class all the way to individuals like myself that are working from day to day, type deal. We have a lot of programs that assist them in that. Jackson here that works on farm has been very helpful in starting a $double program where people can use their EBT benefits, and actually we have community sponsors that double those dollars. So if an individual has $5 they can spend that week for veggies they can come to the market, they can actually have that double to 10 automatically. So it allows them to actually have access to what you and I have access to. There's no reason people that are on EBT shouldn't have access to good, fresh, local products. And that clientele base is very, very educated, very supportive of local foods. And I would see that program expand actually.
I think that what we're seeing, while we're seeing an interest in local food right now, is the life expectancy is decreasing. A lot of us are seeing our parents and grandparents dying at a much younger age than we used to. We're seeing us being sick from our food system, the way our foods are grown. And so there's this motivation now to really think about this and put more time and energy into securing our food locally. One thing I'm concerned about is the USDA just released that by 2060, all of the United States could be dependent on rice, and most of our food would be rice. That concerns me, especially I already know that a large percentage of people are already on formula, either infants or seniors using like Ensure for their supplementation. I don't know about other people, but I don't want to just eat rice. I want my kids to have greens and root crops and tomatoes and peppers and animals that were raised well.
But some of them are already growing that thing on their nose.
So I was only out here producing one crop, and I had all my acreages in that. Of course, I could take a little less for it per share than if I were trying to scatter out everything. Just a lot. It's a lot more management, a lot more input costs, a lot more difficult than raising one commodity type deal. But I think there's a need for it and there's a demand for it. But we have built a industry. We have built a world around monoculture. But you have one bad little niche in that one system in your straight line. Where if I lose one crop out here of one thing, I've got 119 more. To take its place.
Right now, we can get food if we need it pretty easily. As soon as that starts to change, it's going to matter to everybody. So the more people that can care about it right now and create a good, fresh, food system. And the only way that we know how to do it is to be as positive as possible, work hard, create a model that can be, duplicated, and just put the work in every single day.
I think it's feasible to do it. It's not going to be feasible to change a system that built itself in 100 years in 1 year. That's not feasible. If we see a transition back to the way we used to feed ourselves here in America. I mean, you can look every time I go out places. I mean, you can look at our obesity levels here in the United States, our health issues that we're facing. It's not just can we do it, we need to do it. You know, it's just cold hard facts of it. We're slowly killing ourselves. Really, is what we're doing on that.
So thank you for providing us with that overview, Michelle. Yeah, I'm looking at the chat now and it looks like there's lots of excitement. So
I want to mention one thing. That video was actually filmed 7 years ago, and I have to admit that, you know, while Nathan and I had no idea what it would be, during the pandemic and during COVID, of course, all of it started to feel, you know, much more real. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for providing that overview and the presentation, and thank you for letting us share that wonderful glimpse into Need More Acres. I'd like to just ask you a few questions, and then we'll turn it over to all the attendees in the audience today to ask you a few questions as well. So, firstly, when did you start selling to schools, and who were you dealing with typically when you were starting that process?
Yeah, so we started, I think I said earlier, in 2009, selling watermelons to the Bowling Green City schools, and have continued doing that every year. That was just a traditional procurement model, meaning that the food service director would reach out. We would plan months in advance. It takes about 6 months of planning to produce a crop for distribution. So it was primarily the food service staff. And then since then, we've really grown into selling our food either to food service directors or to people who have other funding. So that may be the health department. For ourselves, sometimes we apply for grants and create the funding for those programs. Sometimes we have nonprofits that have funding and are able to provide that.
Great. How like sharp of an incline was it from when you first started to where you're at now? Like, was it gradual? Were there ups and downs, or did it kind of just explode in interest?
Yeah. The first several years before we were farming full time, it was just the watermelon that our farm started to be known for growing watermelons for the schools. We would have our 4 to 6 weeks of deliveries of watermelons, and we didn't really see a whole lot of growth. Once we put in our on-farm certified kitchen and started doing the processing of the vegetables, that's when we really started to see an increase. I would say our sales went from 5% to 20% within a year or two of doing that, and providing those fresh food snacks either through the school's fruit and vegetable program or through the health department or under other funding, to be serving either a snack in the classroom for 100% free lunch students, or just as an educational opportunity in the classroom.
Great. So a question on the preparation space that you have at your farm is, did that come about as a recommendation by schools, or is that something you saw on other farms who are participating in farm to school doing and accommodating, or was that just kind of your own embracement and idea?
So using sort of space on our farm to grow food alongside the students as a community garden, is that what you mean?
Yeah, and then the preparation space that you have carved out so that you can deliver all those sort of packaged and prepared small meals to schools.
Yeah.
How did that idea kind of originate?
Yeah, well, so the school systems had a program, the Kentucky Fruit and Vegetable Program in Bowling Green, and they were doing, it was a snack program in the school system where they could get a snack plus a milk. And what they were doing almost every day for that program originally was the little apple snacks, because it's just a small snack. And when the food service director reached out, she said, "Is there any way you would be able to take on processing more variety for us?" And we are a very diversified farm. We grow over 100 different fruits and vegetables. Any week, no matter for 52 weeks of the year, we're harvesting between 20 or 30 different fruits and vegetables. And so that allowed us to start the program, and we do it from a place of farmer's choice, meaning that we as farmers are choosing which crops are being delivered each week to the school systems for that, and then allows us to really make the system work really well for what's happening on the farm, and then also to make sure that we can have the quality and then a weekly distribution to the schools.
Great, great. Interesting. Um, so have you ever had to make like any significant adjustments in your production, packaging, delivery, or volume to meet particular school needs, or has that been kind of a consistent growth?
That's that second year of doing the snacks for the school systems became a huge growth opportunity for the farm. We put in a couple extra high tunnels. We started growing more root crops. That was a time of pretty big growth. We've also had to do things like when we're distributing the snacks, we'll do it. It just depends on what the school system wants. Some of the schools want just a 2-ounce vegetable snack to be served in the classroom. Others want a variety of maybe 4 to 6 different vegetables for the kids to be sampling and trying. And so really what we're doing is we're sitting down with our community partners, with food service directors, with teachers, with community members, and kind of working out these details, and making sure that what we do fits their.
Great, thank you. So I learned in your presentation that you sell to school districts within, is it 3 separate counties? Is that right?
So Warren County is where Bowling Green is. So we sell to the county schools and the city schools in the Bowling Green area. And then we live in Allen County, Scottsville, which is just one county over. And they only have the one school system,
Okay.
which is the city school system. Yeah.
Great, great. Just generally, what's something that you wish you would have known before starting to sell to schools that you think other farmers would benefit from knowing?
I think the biggest piece of what we've learned through trial and error, so making mistakes and then learning from, is that your farm to school efforts will only grow as quickly as the support you have from your frontline food service staff. So are we listening to them? Are we making sure that we're not putting too much work on them? Are they in a position where they feel included in the conversations about the program and they're excited about it? So they're expressing that to the students when they serve it. And the same for the teachers and the parents. So anytime we're doing a program, we are trying to make sure that we're not repositioning extra workload onto frontline staff. That's why we started taking some of that on as a farm. We're also making sure that the teachers are being brought into the conversations. We're not just throwing food in the classroom. We're including the teachers. We do this by bringing the food service staff to the farm. We feed them a lunch every year as a thank you. We also bring the teachers out to the farm when we can, or we do roundtable discussions with the teachers to see how the programs are going. And we also send educational material home with the students in their backpack so that the parents at home can learn more about what they're doing and why their kids are trying kale at school or rutabaga or something like that. And then also educating the parents about farming as an occupation tends to also get the parents excited too.
Definitely. I like the concept of bringing attending workers to the farm and just the community activity aspect of that. Do you think that what sort of recommendations do you have for a farmer who is approaching maybe a relationship with a food director or any other school buyer? I mean, it seems like you have a really nice approach to it that's sort of community first, but what other suggestions would you have for a farmer who, may not have an existing relationship with any school, directors or schools in general? What would you think the first steps are for them?
I think one thing is to be really realistic. Meaning that you need to know how much time it's going to take from the planning stage to getting the plant started and planting. School service tends to need quite a bit of volume to make it work really. So it can't be something that farmers at the last minute, very often, we really lucked up with those watermelons that first year, but it's very seldom that something that farmers just have left over is going to work for the schools. And I think so being as a farmer, being realistic about what you can actually do, and then being staying as committed as possible to making that work. And so keeping lines of communication open, understanding the burden that is on food service directors is a very helpful thing. And so I would say scaling slowly, making sure you're not trying to scale so quickly that it becomes a burden on the farmer or the food service staff.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. The last question I have before I get a sense of what attendees are wanting to ask you is, where do you see your farm growing? So what direction do you see Need More Acres heading within Farm to School, than just as a farm in general?
I really think that we will be focusing more on this idea of the community garden happening on the farm. I also think that our high school co-op program will be expanded. We were limited to how many participants we could have because of COVID. And I see that program as being really, really helpful to students. The students that participated as seniors realized that while they don't have plans to become farmers, but this work really looks great on a resume. We had 2 students that said, I think I got into college because I said I worked on a farm. And I think that program will continue to expand. I think also making sure that we make the farm more inclusive and available to students who would not sign up for an agriculture class or join the FFA or traditionally be on a farm, making the farm more accommodating to students so that they can have that experience.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Right now, we're going to just transition to Q&A with attendees, and it looks as if there's already a few questions lined up for me in the chat. So I'm going to do my best at starting from the top. Brenda Williams had asked, how did you determine your pricing for watermelons? Was it per pound?
So the school systems used their pricing. If I remember right, it was about $4.25 per watermelon for a seeded watermelon. It's been around that. Maybe it's gone up just a little bit, but that's a really great price comparable to what we would get at the farmer's market for it. Now, I will say that some vegetables are not comparable. Brussels sprouts, for example, we can get $8 a pound on $16 a pound on Brussels sprouts at the farmer's market. We sell them in half-pound bags for $8 a bag. And I think the schools can pay maybe something like $2 or $3 a pound. And so it's really important that when we're talking about procurement, we're looking at what are the items that make sense financially for the farmer. And so what items have that good price point, and watermelons is one of them.
Great, thank you. And folks, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Michelle any questions right now. Well, I'm seeing a few more questions in the chat. Tess had asked, can you talk about financial impact on your farm business? Clearly lots of positive impacts otherwise.
Yeah, so for us, we make somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 a year with our farm to school efforts and projects. So it is a significant amount of income for the farm. While also I would say another sort of side effect, it's not the reason we do this, but we see a lot of people come through the farmer's market and shop from us because their kids got a flyer that came in their backpack, or their kids are asking for kale for the first time, or people are just hearing about our farm. Teachers, food service staff, people at different levels are hearing about the work we're doing, appreciate the commonality that we're trying to have with them, and then they support us financially in other ways beyond just the sales to the schools.
Great. Looks like Lori, you have your hand raised.
Hi, Michelle. I just wanted to follow up and ask, so when you say that 60,000 to 80,000, I think it was the numbers that you said, how much of that is from direct sales and how much of that is from funding that you get to be able to implement these programs? And how do you manage all of that, the community partnerships and applying for funding sources?
Yeah. So I would say about 10 to 15,000 of that is procurement, direct sales to the school systems. The rest is through the additional, and when I say traditional, I mean sales for the cafeteria for lunch mainly. I consider any sale that I make, it doesn't matter who's paying for it. If I'm being paid for it as a farmer and it's being fed to a student, it falls into the farm to school umbrella for me. And I think that's helped me sort of opened up my mind to how to make this work. So I'll say that. With funding, I sit on the Community Health Planning Council for the Barren River District. So that's 10 counties around the Bowling Green area. And I also sit on the Community Health Action Team in Allen County. I would say showing up as a farmer in spaces where people have this common goal of increasing the health of our community has been a great way for me to build connections, partnerships, to build trust, so that people see that I'm not just showing up to sell my food. I really do care about this. Through that is when we started to figure out different alternative funding sources in projects like that.
Holly, you have your hand up.
Hi, yes, thank you again. I'll just echo everyone's thanks for all this great information and all the great work that you're doing on a regular basis. I was just curious to learn more. I love the concept that you're talking about the community garden being on the farm and how you've incorporated students into the processing of the fruits and vegetables. How are you doing that, managing that with the travel piece, like getting the students there and back, and the logistics part of that? Is there any more information that you can share about, even taking the fruit and vegetables back to the schools and some of that piece of it?
Yeah. So we have 8 students participating in the co-op that have their own transportation. So they're 16 or older, they have a vehicle, and they're able to drive to the farm and back. During COVID, there was a lot of freedom on when they could come to the farm and work. Now that school's back in, or actually it's out again, but for the summer, but they were allowed to leave virtual school or in-person school after 1 o'clock. So a traditional co-op model that you would have within a high school. Those students work. We assign 1 or 2 students a day normally to be coming to the farm to work. We were doing that because of COVID, but it also helps space out the crops when they're being distributed. I also want to say we have almost zero waste on the farm. Because we do a farmer's choice, we have our CSA and farmers market sales, and then basically what's left over be harvested fresh from the field, then gets distributed in some of these other programs. That's honestly probably the way we're able to make the whole entire program work. So when the students come to the farm, they have, through the community organizing part of their co-op, identified a place, a partner somewhere in the community that they can distribute food. Some of them find their own funding through the Rotary Club or other organizations, or they find places that have a budget for food. And then some of them I help provide that funding source, or a partner we've already had. So for example, on a Monday, we have Jay and Catherine. They were in the photos I showed you earlier. They come to the farm. They know that they are going to harvest 20 pounds of greens for the school's culinary arts program. They know that they are going to process 100 snacks to be delivered to the core, which is the old YMCA's after school program. And they know that they are going to harvest 20 fruit and vegetable bags to be delivered to a food pantry in Scottsville. They come, they've been trained, they do all that work, they do the processing, they package it, and then they do the delivery. On Fridays, for students who do not have their own transportation, they're not 16, they don't have a vehicle, and they're not able to drive out here and join the co-op, they're coming to the farm with transportation. So the Allen County Scottsville schools are providing bus transportation every Friday, even during the summer months, to bring the students out here to the farm to work.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it looks like there's a question in the chat from Tiffany. Can you speak more about the division of labor? Are you able to spend more of your paid time on building and operating farm to school programming beyond selling to schools because you have people full-time farming on the property? Do you have paid employees beyond you and your husband?
Yes, so we have 11 part-time employees. A lot of them are younger people, so 17, 18-year-olds, or young 20-somethings. Sometimes we have some that middle to late 20-somethings that went to college and now they don't really want to do what they went to school for, and they're trying to figure out the world. And we also have a couple people that are experts in their field. So for example, we have a bookkeeper. Highly recommend, if you're going to be a farmer and do this work, pay people to do what they're good at. And bookkeeping was definitely one of those for us. And so, yeah, we do have quite a bit of, in operation and that we manage. I think, Nathan and I being able to do that together, he manages most of what happens out in the field. And then I manage the employees, the funding, the community partner side.
Great. And then there's one more question from Mackenzie. How does your delivery work for your farm to the schools? And you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe an opportunity to expand on how that operation works.
Yeah, so we deliver to the schools kind of at different times, depending on what the season is and what we're doing. Some things we do as a weekly delivery, and some things we do as special projects, that sort of thing. Most of the delivery people that we have are these students, these co-op students that we've hired. And, I think it's very important that we're very consistent, meaning that there's a lot of very high expectation for these high school co-op students. And they know that they're going to be expected to be here every week, and that the delivery has to be made, on time with a high quality product. I think because we do that, our partners are willing to take that farmer's choice. They're willing to take the food that makes sense for the farm to be delivering that week.
Great, thank you. Any more questions for Michelle, folks? Feel free to unmute yourself or share through the chat. Oh, it looks like there's one from Jessica. Can you talk about your food safety plan and if you have any certifications that allow you to sell to schools, GAP specifically?
Yeah, we have the GAP certification. We do the food safety program. We've had several of our high school co-op students, plus my son who's 17, take that. We work really closely with the health departments, and we also have a state manufacturing permit. So we're inspected pretty frequently throughout the year, and that helps keep us kind of on top of that. We're also in direct communication with the school systems on, for example, how they want the food to be harvested, packaged, and then delivered, and that looks differently for each of the schools that we sell to.
Great, thank you. And this might be our last question for the day. How is Farmer's Choice different from forward contracting?
I'm not really sure what forward contracting is.
What I understood forward contracting to be is that, and by the way, you're just so inspiring. What I understood forward contracting would be is that the school district, it sounds like it's the opposite. The school district would ask for certain crops to be grown and would pay for them. Like I believe that's what the school district in Minnesota does, is the school district says, we would like you to grow these specific crops. So they grow those specific crops, the farmers, and then they pay up. It's like they're paying up front for them to plant these crops. And I may be like butchering this, but that's what I understood it to be. So it was more of a question for the group than specifically for you. So I'm sorry, I put you up.
Okay, but so I would say that our watermelon sales fit that, because we work with the school systems. They tell us about how many watermelons they're going to want, and then we try to deliver them. I will say that in the last 12 years or so, there's probably been 3 or 4 years we didn't have watermelons to sell. Too much rain, a late freeze, whatever it might be. That's why the Farmer's Choice is actually a really great option, I believe. So what Farmer's Choice might look like is the school system would say, we want this many pounds of a root crop. It doesn't matter which one. It can be radish, it can be turnip, it can be rutabaga, it can be, whatever the root crop is that you have on the farm that is the highest quality this week, and that your farm can manage harvesting and delivering. Same thing with greens, giving us that flexibility. We're delivering, if it's for salad, if it's for a side item, if it's for a soup, if it's, we're delivering items that can be cooked in the way that they're going to be cooking it. But it's making it make sense for the farm and making sure that we can deliver week after week. A quick note, we actually do that with the food pantries and restaurants that we work with as well. They tell us the type of vegetable they need and how many pounds, and then it's always Farmer's Choice what we deliver.
Great. Well, I think I speak for everyone. I'm saying this super inspiring segment, Michelle. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story. Maybe everyone can join me in a collective applause.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. And yeah, we'll definitely follow Need More Farms into the future.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Great. So folks, we are going to go on a quick break right now. Let's reconvene back here at 1:35 Eastern time. So just a quick break, and then we'll jump back into the mix.
All right. I hope everybody is energized and inspired from that morning. Such an incredible opportunity to hear from Michelle. We are going to continue on with another very special guest. We have with us Lydia Oberholzer with NYU. Lydia is one of our evaluation partners on the project. And as we've heard through the last couple of days, Jenny Lee's pointed out where there are evaluation opportunities, both in the introductions and conclusion. Lydia is going to dive a little bit deeper into that, and both what that evaluation looks like, as well as the protocols and process. So I'm going to turn it over to Lydia. Lydia, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I wanted to just go through, as Lacey noted, the main parts of the evaluation that correspond with the workshops that you'll be doing. You can go to the first slide. So part of hosting the producer trainings will be conducting pre-surveys and post-surveys. On this overview slide, you can see that we have 3 different surveys going out to producers. And we hope that facilitators will take part in 2 out of 3 of those. So the first 2, pre-survey and post-survey. Before they take part in the training, we ask that you give them a pre-survey, which is the longer of the surveys because it includes additional information. And that one is 10 to 15 minutes long. Right at the end of the training, there's a short survey. It's about 5 to 10 minutes long. And then finally, in about 6 months to 1 year after their training, they will hear from us online. You won't have to do anything. They'll receive an email invitation, and that is the shortest of the surveys, and it's 5 minutes long. You can go to the next survey. So I wanted to give you, next slide. I wanted to give you just kind of like an overview of the survey content. We tried to be within trying to get all the information we wanted. We tried to make sure the surveys were as short as we possibly could get them. So some things are just on the pre-survey, some on the post, some on the pre and the post. As you can see, we ask about farm demographics only on the pre-survey. So that includes things like farm size, products, products produced, and years farming. When we ask about participation in farm to school activities, we're looking at their current participation at that time in both direct farm to school sales and through intermediaries. And we do that on the pre-survey, and then the final survey at follow-up, the really short one that takes 5 minutes. And what we want to do is look at change at whether that participation has changed at all in terms of farm to school sales. In terms of their knowledge of farm to school topics, we look at that one from pre to post. And again, we're looking at the change in their confidence in marketing to schools and their knowledge regarding certain farm to school topics. These are self-reported levels of knowledge. That's really the most we want to do, given that we don't want to quiz everybody on topics. And then finally, the feedback on training, on the training, what were the most and least useful topics that were covered, other information that they need. And this is given at the post survey only at the end of the training. So I want to dive a little bit into the pre-survey and the post-survey and just kind of go through the protocol for each. You can change the slide. So for the pre-survey, you'll see on the introduction slide deck, it's 2 slides, slide 3 and 7. They provide instructions for conducting the pre-survey at the beginning of your training. There's a screenshot here shown above for the slide deck. We also include very specific instructions in the protocol for either a virtual survey, if you're doing a virtual training, or an in-person survey for those that might be doing in-person workshops. In regard to the pre-survey, if you're in person, the survey packet you will be sharing with the producers includes an informed consent form. And you'll see it, it's one headed, it has a header with OMB statement on it. It's all of this has gone through OMB because we have partnered with USDA FNS, so everything needed to go through the OMB process for surveys. So producers will have one copy of the informed consent for their own records, and we encourage them to keep that one. If you're virtual, the informed consent will be on one of the first pages they see when they enter the survey link, which you can see there. Before you begin the survey, again, the protocol will go through all of this. You'll instruct the producers to read the informed consent, and if they agree to the consent, they should check the box. And you're going to want to make sure to remind producers that their participation in the evaluation is voluntary. They have the right to withdraw at any time. They don't have to provide a response for any survey questions they don't want to. And again, the protocol will go through all of this. It has a play-by-play in terms of what are the key points that you want to go over in terms of the survey being voluntary and all of those things. For in-person surveys, when the producers are finished with their consent forms and the survey, you're going to ask them to fold them in half, keeping them together and return to you. And we'll have instructions for how you return them to us. If you're hosting your local producer training virtually, the consent form and survey will be submitted electronically. So this is prior to them taking part in the training. And again, the OMB statement, the consent form, all of that will take about 20 minutes, with the survey being about 15 minutes of that. And the next slide. The post-survey slide is found in the conclusion slide deck, slide number 12. The screenshot is shown here. At this point, you can remind the producers that they've already completed the pre-survey at the beginning of the training, and now it's time to complete the short post-survey. Again, this survey is shorter than the first survey, and they've seen most of the questions in the survey because they've been through it just a couple of days before. If they're virtual, again, they're going to go to the link, which we provide there, and then we provide that in the protocol. If they're in person, they'll have a paper copy of the survey again. The directions for the post-survey are the same. It's voluntary. They have the right to withdraw at any time. They don't have to answer certain questions if they don't want to. When they furnish this survey, again, they're going to bring it up to you if you're in person. If not, they'll submit it virtually. And finally, also the protocol will tell you that you are to remind the producers that they should expect to receive a request to complete a very, very short survey about 6 months to a year from now from their training from NYU. Whether they remember that or not, I don't know, but hopefully we'll get a decent amount of feedback on that. And next slide. And it's just a quick note to remind you that you'll be getting your own survey any minute for this workshop that you're taking part in. It's going to come from Carolyn Dimitri, who's my colleague. She had a taped context at the beginning of the workshop, and that should be coming any minute to your email. And we hope that you fill that out. We do take time to look at the comments in these surveys and to hopefully improve other workshops. And so we really hope for your feedback. I'm happy to answer any questions. Carolyn and I are both available to any facilitator or producer. Our information is there. It's also in the packets and the slide decks and the protocols. We're here to help you as we can, and we're happy to do so. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Lydia. The first question that's come up, and we've talked about this a little bit, but if you could share what folks should do if they're only presenting one of the modules or not presenting the complete training together.
Yeah, so that's been something that came up. It's not something we had planned for. I want to put in some context. We needed to plan for the evaluation before we could plan for the curriculum because everything needed to go through OMB, and OMB is the Office of Management and Budget. The process for getting surveys and evaluations approved through the federal government is very long. So we kind of put the cart before the horse in this one. And so we're trying to be as flexible as we can be. On the post survey, we are asking producers what modules they covered so that we can take that into account when we do the analysis. We still want to collect that data, and we will look at those who might have only taken part in one module or two modules, and those who took part in the full training. So I hope that will be, I mean, it's not a perfect answer to all of this, but we do not have the ability to change our evaluation protocol and surveys at this point, other than those small changes.
So we do encourage folks to still, even if you're just presenting part of it, we do encourage you to still provide the evaluation, and there will be ways within that evaluation to identify which modules.
Exactly. Yep.
And one thing I just want to remind folks and ask of folks is that we really want to know when you're presenting any of this material. And part of that reason is so that we can support you in that evaluation. And Lydia, correct me if I'm wrong, but you all will be able to, for folks who are doing in-person trainings, you'll be able to send them that packet of the hard copies of evaluation and instructions.
Yeah. So when you, my understanding is that that facilitators will keep in pretty decent contact with Lacey and the gang as they go forward with either presenting full-on workshops or modules, and that we will know ahead of time and enough time to get you the paper copies of the surveys that you need and the protocols. We'll be shipping those from New York University. So we need a couple of weeks to get those to you, but we're happy to get everything to you that you need. And we're also happy to help you pull out some of the data if you're interested in the results of your trainings, especially things like what more do you need training on? What were the most useful parts and the least useful parts of the training? Those are also things that we're happy to help get to you after the training is done.
Great. Other questions for Lydia? Feel free to unmute or add those questions to the chat box.
Can I follow up on the question we just talked about?
Yep.
So if a producer comes to one conference and say does module 1, and then we subsequently provide module 2 at another conference, and he comes to that conference and does module 2.
So you're trying to make things difficult.
No, I'm not trying to. I'm just, this is sort of
No,
the
I
way
know.
we're envisioning, rolling this out in Kentucky. I'm just wondering what instructions we would give that producer then as to how he fills out the evaluation, he or she.
I think if you know that he or she has come to the first, how long in between are you talking in terms of the workshop?
Well, we don't know, but our plan was to sit down and look at the various workshops where we thought we could capture people and try and, develop a strategy for making as much of it as possible available. So I would say, throughout the year, so maybe say 3 months in between.
So if there's, I think that we'll want to work with you one-on-one to try. I don't have the, I could guess at what the answer might be right now, but we haven't thought through that possibility. So let us think through that possibility and definitely get back to you about what we would say about that. I think we'd want to work one-on-one with you.
Okay.
To kind of work through like the timing. So if the timing was like 6 months, it would be my feeling that you would want to resurvey them. But if it was like 1 month, I would feel like you could just give them the post survey if you knew they had been at and done the pre-survey. So I want to go over it with my colleagues first before saying definitely that's what we would do. And I want to get back to you if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Please bring up any other issues like this because we are, we're still learning as we're going. We're building the ship. So anything that you feel like we need to kind of fiddle with, it would be great to have some of that feedback now.
Lydia, I'll tag on Jackie's question and ask, we had contemplated a virtual version of the programming and maybe something that would be asynchronous that would be able to be viewed at the producer's convenient time. And so if any thoughts that you have on how to work that with the surveys and or whether there's a prohibition against doing this training in that fashion.
It's not up to me to answer the question whether the training should be done in that fashion because I'm not an expert on the curriculum. But I think if you were doing something online whereby a farmer is coming and going, I would still ask them that the pre-survey be part of the front end and then the post-survey be part of the back end, and that we know that it's virtual. And that's, again, I wrote down to talk with Lacey about a process for you all to let us know what you're doing. So that, we know that you're doing an asynchronous online training. So I know that. But I would want it to be, in that case, I would want it to go from pre-survey to post-survey and asynchronous. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Great. Well, we love hearing about all the creative ways folks are thinking about utilizing this curriculum and resources. And
Definitely.
we will definitely be thinking through with Lydia how to make sure we can still evaluate those in the appropriate way. So again, I think the moral of the story is please keep in touch with us and continue to let us know. And thank you so much, Lydia, for partnering on this and working with all of us to make sure that we can evaluate all the different ways that folks are utilizing this material.
Thank you for having Carolyn and I look forward to working with you.
Thanks, Lydia. Well, to keep us moving, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Anna, to move on our next section of the day. Anna, it's all yours.
Thanks, Lacey, and hi, everyone. While I'm pulling up my slides here, I'd love to just see some reaction GIFs, some thumbs up, some celebrations, some comments. How you doing? We're headed into the home stretch here. I see not a lot yet. A few thumbs up. Thank you, those of you, for humoring me. All right. So I'm Anna Mullen, and I'm Communications Director of National Farm to School Network. I'm really happy to be sharing with you about our planning and outreach tools. So this next section of the presentation is really all about planning and promoting the trainings with this guide that we have created. And so for some context setting, throughout this week, you have been learning about the training content and going through each of those modules. You've been meeting with your state teams and starting to brainstorm how you might put all of this into practice. And in this last session that we're going to do right now, I'm going to offer you a structure that you can use to put all of that brainstorming and all of those ideas into event planning and outreach. So this is really the planning, the logistics, all of the little details that no one's going to notice if everything goes right. So we have about 45 minutes for this session, and the bulk of that is actually going to be you back in your state groups one last time to start thinking about creating your local producer training. But first, I'm going to introduce you to our planning and outreach guide, and then we're going to review its key components. And then I'm going to set you up with an activity to help guide you through using the guide with your state planning teams. And then we're going to take a short break and then come back together as a full group for one last time. And you're each going to give us an update on like where you are as your state teams, what you're planning, what you're thinking about, and what your next steps are. So I'm going to start by introducing you to this guide and give you some background about how it came to be. So if you haven't yet, please pull out your planning and outreach guide. It's the skinny one in your packet. And Jenny Lee will drop the digital link in the chat box for you if you don't have the hard copy version. The intention of this tool is to provide you both with a checklist, kind of like a step-by-step how-to guide to plan your training from start to finish, and then also to provide you with tools and templates to make that a really easy lift for you. So I want to note that this is a really interactive document. And it also interacts and connects a lot with that facilitator guide that we spent a lot of time looking at earlier this week. So you'll notice that, and you'll notice that it's really intentional that those two documents really work together. So if you're in the online digital version of these, you'll notice they like hyperlink to each other a lot. So we created this guide recognizing that you are all professionals, and it's very likely that this is not your first time planning a training of some kind. It's not your first rodeo. But we really tried to build a guide that gives you like an edge up, a crutch, kind of a head start by providing a roadmap to do all of this. It's not designed to replace you, but rather to help you get your work done faster. However, we did work with some assumptions when we created this, kind of like with an order of operations to things. And these come from our own experiences in communications and in event planning and education. And so you'll see that in the layout of this tool. We also tried to integrate some constructive education theory here. We wanted to give you some settings and some tools, not necessarily the answers to things. So everything here is like fair play, and you are absolutely welcome to adapt and change for your needs. So I recognize that like this is a bit of a mixed message. We're both saying that you know your work and you have your own skill sets and things right in front of you that you are already experts in. And then we're also giving you this guide saying, if you need the support of like guidance step by step of how to put together one of these trainings, now that you have the content, you can totally use this. So for those of you who are like 80s and 90s people like me, this is kind of like the choose your own adventure style guide of like planning an event. You get to choose, you get to decide how to plan your training. And this guide is just really meant to be an assist in that. So the core of this guide is a checklist. And if you're in your hard copy version, it starts on page 3. Looks like this. And we designed this checklist to really give you a flow to the planning process of putting together a training event. So you can literally start at the beginning of this checklist and work your way straight through the end to hopefully have a really successful training. This checklist, however, doesn't know the specifics or the details of your local producer training. So as we were just talking about, you may be planning something that's asynchronous, and that would be like a little bit different than what we've given you here. So its entire situation and what you're planning for. So blindly following this checklist will probably pigeonhole you into something that's stale and uninteresting, and that's not what we're going for. I just want to pause and make sure you can hear me. I got an unstable connection. Okay, looks like I'm okay. All right, so that's the checklist. So there's another point about this guide that I want to talk about, which is that nothing here is gospel. You'll notice that we keep using the word guide for this set of tools in front of you. And so while I'm a communications professional who has promoted lots of events, I'm also not you, and I do not work in your workplace in your context. And so you know best what is going to work in your neck of the woods when you put together this training. So as we've been talking about throughout the past few days, one of the intentions of the overall Bringing the Farm to School program is for you to really localize all of this content that we've given you and to make it work best for your place and for the producers that you want to work with. So you'll see lots of opportunities in this guide for you to do just that, especially with the templates that are here. And this goes back to the fact that we haven't provided you with a rule book. Take out what doesn't work for you and add what needs to be added. So a few other things I want to point out about this guide. The online version that Jenny Lee has linked in the chat box, and she'll put it in once again, is fully hyperlinked. And in my opinion, the online version is actually a better and more useful version than this hard copy version because of all of those hyperlinks. It's really meant to be a very interactive document. So when you're in that document, you'll see purple hyperlinks, and these ones will bounce you throughout the document itself. So for example, in that checklist, you might see something that says plan your budget, and that's hyperlinked in purple. And if you click that, it'll drop you down to the budget template in the document. So that's how the purple hyperlinks work. And then the blue hyperlinks, these are ones that take you to editable templates or other documents in the greater package of materials. So these are more like external hyperlinks. And at the bottom of every template in the document, you'll see one of those blue links. And if you click that, it'll download an editable version of that thing that you're looking at. So you'll see this, for example, with the press release. You'll see it written out in the document, but if you click that blue link, you can download a Word document to fully edit that to whatever context is needed for you. All right, you can also, as you already know, go directly to the Bringing the Farm to School webpage to download all of those templates directly. So you don't necessarily have to open up this document to do that. And we wanted to provide all of those links in one place like that on the Bringing the Farm to School webpage for you to kind of have a quick like cheat sheet to access things that you may need on the fly or you may want to share with other people on your planning team. So know that we're offering you those templates in a few different spaces and in a few different ways, hopefully to make them easy for you to access. So let's get to the main focus of this session that we're in. So in a few minutes, we're going to break you back out into your state teams and set you up to actually start planning your local producer training. And once you're in your teams, we want you to first take a look at this whole guide if you haven't yet. Give yourself a few moments to familiarize yourself with the checklist that starts on page 3, and scan the whole thing and see what's kind of fitting and making sense and what you may want to modify. Then start to think about where you can make it work for what you are thinking about and what you've been talking about for the past 3 days. And specifically, we'll have you focus on the timeline and the flow of planning. Does this match your capacity? Does it match what you've been thinking? Review the templates and ask yourself, do these fit our needs? Which of these templates might we use? Which additional resources might you want to create on your own to do outreach? And then if you are overachievers and you have the extra time, you can actually start to customize these tools and download them and start to play with them and see what needs to be changed and what you want to add or fit in. And you can do that with the timeline template too. You might start pulling out the pieces that you for sure want to move on and adding additional pieces or subtracting the ones that don't feel relevant. So the essential question for this activity is, how does this guide match up or mesh up with all the ways you're already doing your work and all of the conversations that you've been having so far this week about materializing this bringing the farm to school training for your state? So once you've done that bit of familiarizing work as an individual and then come back together as your state team to look at that together, we want you to work together to come up with answers to these 5 questions. And then we're going to come back at the end of your breakout sessions and have you share them with the rest of everyone else on our call here. So be sure to appoint a note taker in your group, someone to jot down your answers or take them on your Jamboard. That's, I guess, what I mean by note taker. Make sure someone's taking notes in your Jamboard. And then also a report back leader, someone who's willing to come off mute and share with the rest of the group what your state team is planning and thinking about. So all of these questions are listed on your Jamboard. You don't need to jot them out here and you don't need to memorize them, but I will review them quickly with you. So these 5 questions we want you to focus on are, why are you doing this training? Who needs to be on your planning team? When and where is your training going to be, or what options might you be thinking of? Who is your producer audience? Is it small, diversified vegetable growers? Is it protein producers? And then start thinking about what media outlets you might ask or tap to help start doing your outreach for this event that you're planning. So those are the 5 questions you can focus on. However, I also want to recognize that you have been working on some of these questions for a few days now. And we encourage you to go back into your Jamboards and review the answers to these questions. For example, the why are you doing this training, or who should be on your planning team? You've probably been talking about these already. And if you still need to discuss any of these, like the why or the who or the where questions, go for it. That is totally valid way to spend your time right now. Those are really foundational questions to address before you start thinking about these questions of like, where are you going to send out your press release and what partner organizations do you want to ask to help promote the event? And if you're ready to start getting into the specifics of your event planning, you can put more of that focus on those later questions or into customizing the templates. So kind of just feel out as a state group where you are and what questions make the most sense to focus on. So the remainder of our time together in this session is going to be back in your state groups. And we hope that you will really see how this guide can really set you up for success in planning the trainings that we've been talking about for a few days now. We want to specifically also call your attention to the colorful pop-out boxes that are throughout the checklists. We have a whole series of questions here that will guide you through like choosing a location and thinking about a producer audience, etc. So be sure again to like notice those pop-out boxes and how they might help guide you through these questions. All right, so that's the activity, that's the assignment. I will pause and see if there are any questions about this training guide or anything else that we've talked about today that we can answer before we send you back to your state breakouts.
Anna, this is Tracy. I just want to confirm that these breakouts are not going to include facilitators in them, correct? They are self-facilitated.
Yeah, you beat me to it, but I was going to share that in a minute. I'm just looking at the chat box, and I think there weren't any other questions here. I don't think so. Okay, great. Looks like just like affirmation, these look like good tools and links to things. So again, spend some time looking through the planning and outreach guide, go back to your jam boards, and figure out as sort of a state team where you want to start. Do you need to answer kind of those foundational trainings, or do you want to focus more on like, now you kind of have an idea of a training, how do you want to put it into action with this planning and outreach guide? Both of those are totally great places to start and to spend time working. So as Tracy mentioned, we're going to send you back to your state groups. We're going to give you 30 minutes, and we are going to have these be facilitator less time for you all as a state group to connect. Though there will be facilitators here in the main room, so if you get stuck or if you need help with anything or a thought partner, holler and someone will pop into your room. If you have questions about the planning and outreach guide, I would be happy to join you in your breakout, so just pop back into the main room to let us know. We'll give you 30 minutes to connect with your state group. Reminder, take notes, and have a report back person who can share back for about 2 minutes when we come back as a whole group about what your state is thinking about and planning, or what additional questions you have or resources you might be looking for. All right, on your marks, get sets, go states. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're really in the home stretch here. And we know that you all have been brainstorming as states a lot this week, but we haven't really heard from each of you or allowed you all to talk to each other about what you're planning. And so we kind of want to just create a little space here for each state to share back what you're thinking about or planning, or what questions you still have, maybe what next steps you're planning for if you don't have answers to questions of what you're planning yet. There are no wrong answers to your sharebacks. This is not a contest for who got the furthest in their planning. It's really just a shareback space to be able to thought partner and hear how other states are thinking that might help you in your state and what you're planning. So I'm going to popcorn style call out states, and hopefully in your breakouts you identified someone who would like to give a report back, and we'd invite you to come off mute and turn your camera on and share back what your state is planning, and then for everyone else to continue using that chat box to share any questions you have or additional thoughts. All of that is welcome. So community space here right now. Let's get started with Tennessee.
Okay, I guess I'll be the spokesperson. Hi, everyone. So Tennessee, we are really just focusing on establishing an official farm to school network for the state and how we can collaborate more. And to implement this training that we've learned about, so I work for the state agency, and as the state agency farm to school representative on this call, and we've already incorporated a very similar local procurement produce trainer into a statewide conference. So the Department of Agriculture and the Fruit and Vegetable Association, they host this Pick Tennessee conference every year, and we've already established a very condensed version of the training, about 2 hours into that state conference. But moving forward, we'd like to bring in our partners, you know, from food hubs and other food networks versus just the state agency providing this training within this larger conference, to show our collaborative work across the board. So yeah, basically more collaboration and a more unified network.
Great, thanks Marlene, thanks Tennessee. How about Florida?
Hey there, this is Andrew Smith with the Florida Department of Ag. Unfortunately, I can't turn my camera on right now, but happy to share a little bit about how our breakouts went. Unfortunately, FDACS being our frustratingly difficult to work with government agency, we really weren't able to commit to the solid plans of fleshing out, an entire training. So we talk more about kind of the logistical things that we're going to take back to our directors and leadership to see if we can get the buy-in for this kind of training. So we spoke kind of about the power structure, how, decision making would be shared, and try to have, kind of an equal share of decision making power between each agency that is involved. We kind of discussed how we would want to format this training, and kind of discuss different options to reach different regional audiences. As we know, Florida is such kind of a weird state where we're longer. So we have a lot of different growing regions and things like that. So there's a lot of questions that we tried to answer in a more hypothetical sense of how we would roll this out to the state and our producers. And we talked about kind of tacking it onto the department's farm to school conference in the future, to maybe when we have everyone in one spot. And we talked more just about the logistical side of things. So a lot of our takeaway, at least for FDAC's standpoint, is going to be how can we take this back and present it to management for that buy-in, for a traditional workshop, or how we would tack it onto something else.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Andrew, and thanks everyone from Florida who's here. How about Georgia?
Sure, yeah, and I'll apologize as well. I know I saw y'all earlier, but my internet's been going on and out, so I've turned my computer off to try to have a better connection today. So our group, similar to what Tennessee and Florida have shared, we were really trying to talk about how this could actually work in our state. And we have different groups that are working on similar projects, and we talked about how we could incorporate some of the content in some of those projects that are already ongoing or that are already in the works. And so taking pieces of this and the thoroughness of it, and putting it into some of those pieces that are already in progress, and then thinking through if we do incorporate this in a more complete form in the future, could that be done in a virtual module pattern where people can work at their own pace, and what that might look like, and then identifying some of the partners that we think that are also working on this type of content that weren't able to join us this week, and making sure they know about this content, sharing it with them, and helping to answer any questions, and seeing if there's a way to incorporate this going forward. Did I miss anything, Kimberly? We also in Georgia had the opportunity of connecting with several other states throughout the week in our group, which was exciting. So I know today we were working with Alabama, and we've worked with Mississippi this week as well. So let me know if y'all had anything that we needed to share as well from our group.
I think you did a great job. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah, thank you, Holly, and thanks folks from Georgia. And to that point, folks from Alabama on the call, which I think maybe there's just one person from Alabama, want to share anything about your thinking or ideas you have from the Alabama lens? Our Alabama person might not be on with us anymore. And how about Mississippi?
And I won't speak for either of them, but I know they were in a lot of our conversations, and we had similar thoughts. So I think we're kind of in the same space there as well.
Thanks, Holly. How about Kentucky?
Sorry, I was trying to turn on my video. So I'm Cindy Finiseth with the Kentucky Horticulture Council. So keep in mind, everything from my perspective is produce, but I am aware of that and trying to remember that there are those protein producers out there too. So just a disclaimer there before I get started. So, we really want to reach kind of those three different populations of, those who are currently doing farm to school that could optimize what they're doing, those who are interested to really help them engage and gateway into farm to school. And then also that group of producers that don't know this is a viable option for them. So we've kind of been thinking of kind of those 3 different populations and how to address the different needs of those different groups. So we have a tentative timeline that we've developed. So a hyperlocal pilot in early December with a small group as part of a USDA Farm to School grant. We have a very condensed group of growers and food service directors. So doing a pilot in this very small scale to kind of work out some of the kinks and see, you know, what works, what doesn't work, how we can be better at it. And then rolling out some pieces at the Fruit and Vegetable Conference in January of 22, Eastern Kentucky Farmers Conference in February of 22, and then our AgVets workshop in March of 22. And then one of the great ideas that came out of our group was kind of a teaser at all of the commodity conferences so that we can talk to them about, oh, here, this is an option, and then have a scheduled like full day training afterwards so we could talk about it, get them excited, but then immediately gateway them into the training where really could dive deeply into those modules. So that's kind of our plan right now. We didn't really get past first quarter of 22. But we think this is going to be great. We've got a great group of people. We've identified a few gaps. We want to get, you know, some actual producers and some food service directors onto our planning team. And we've tried to, you know, think very strategically statewide, you know, different scales of growers, and then also kind of the physiogeographical regions so that we can, you know, make it make sense for different growers across the state.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cindy, and great to hear what y'all are thinking about in Kentucky. North Carolina, South Carolina. I know you guys were combined. North Carolina or South Carolina want to share what y'all talked about?
Ben, you want to talk? I can share a little bit. I'm Tess. I'm with Cooperative Extension and the Center for Environmental Farming Systems in North Carolina, and I roped a lot of these folks into coming. So I owe them a lot of beer, I'm told, for rescheduling their week. But we have a great group of folks too, and I think kind of a mishmash of all the things that have been shared already, all the way from Kentucky, you know, maybe where could run a pilot. I think Ed has some farmers that are ready to go, and they've got food hub things in the works there too, as well as an existing. So again, like there might be an opportunity to pilot sooner rather than later. And mostly I think what we talked about is getting a better sense of who and how, you know, really kind of doing some outreach with farmers to find out what kind of mechanisms, whether asynchronous or virtual or face-to-face, regional, again, where folks are in terms of their needs and wants. And so maybe we'll start with a survey to farmers to see what their preferences might be. Because again, we want to tailor it to their needs. So I think we have some good connections with South Carolina and can maybe think about some regional structure things. Again, we need to cross-reference the regulations and so forth to see, you know, if it would be easy enough to divide out a training into North and South around those specifics, but like the idea of a food shed and doing some work together. And we already have CFSA, which is a Carolina based organization, so it covers both states already. And then yeah, maybe just some initial promos. So again, thinking about that idea that again was already shared about a short 2-hour kind of maybe the first module or intro kind of thing of, you know, enough information to see whether folks want to go further and get folks excited. And around that, you know, we're really just thinking about stories. It's been the stories and the farmers from this week that have really moved all of us. I think today was really magic, but all the stories that have shared from all the farmers really gets it moving. And we've got farmers who are part of our North Carolina Department of Ag Farm to School program. We've got farmers who sell to distribution companies and farmers who sell directly to school nutrition directors now, that I'm sure we can get stories from all of them to really show the range of breadth of types of farmers that that this would be applicable for. And that might get some folks on board that, as again, a number of states have already said, don't even know that they might be interested in this yet. So COVID context is, one picture. And yeah, otherwise, again, things that people already said, bumping out our team a little bit and continuing to talk and move forward. And again, I think starting with survey and maybe a pilot. So anybody else want to chime in and add? And yes, I'll provide beer soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess. And thanks, North Carolina team, for being here. I'll just, call out our few states that I know we had smaller teams from, but Alabama, Mississippi, or South Carolina, want to share anything? Any thoughts, reflections?
I can share for Alabama. Hey, I'm Natalie Bishnoy with the Farm Food Collaborative, a local food hub in Alabama. And we work with our farm to school team at the Department of Ag. I think we're going to kind of try to reconvene. We already have a lot of producer outreach related to farm to school. And as a food hub, we kind of cover a lot of this ground for the farmer. So that's kind of, especially because we're a food hub that's part of a nonprofit. So we're real mission driven. And our mission is to assist farmers in getting into farm to school and teaching them about all of that. So we will, our team is going to get together and kind of talk it over next week and debrief from this, and then pull pieces out that would be, that we can use for bringing in new farmers. We've also talked about potentially doing, like a little mini workshop we have a couple of land grant universities here. So maybe going to those. We've already done some presentations with some of their conferences before. So, maybe we could do a little, intro to farm to school, there. And then the Department of Ag has talked about potentially taking some of these trainings to some of the other conferences as well, and doing kind of like a little hybrid mini version at those places. So
thanks, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you all for giving your share backs and for sharing with the rest of the group what y'all are thinking. And I hope there might have been some helpful nuggets there to spur additional ongoing next steps. I was just jotting down some of what I heard, things like building up your teams seemed to be something that lots of you named, getting stakeholders and decision makers involved, capturing more stories and sharing those out, and how that can be a part of helping do some like teasers to get producers interested in learning more about farm to school. That survey to find out what producers are looking for and how that might be used, and regionalizing and thinking about even how within your own states that there are different areas that might have different needs for producers, and how to honor that in these trainings are all really great. So thank you all very much for sharing back. And I will pass it back to Tomas.
Great, thank you, Anna. So yeah, as we end today, I want to encourage you all to first complete the evaluations of the workshop, which should be sitting in your email inboxes now. And additionally, I'd like to encourage you all to connect with us for support for your producer trainings as we move forward into the year. Lastly, please let us know if there's anything that you need support in implementing your trainings, and also just keep us in the loop about any scheduled trainings that you may have on the calendar already, or any sort of tips or suggestions on really creating those within your state. So yeah, thank you for that. And then additionally, stay tuned for additional materials that'll be provided to you over the summer, specifically about supporting you in producing the training. Um, we'd like to thank our partners at the USDA's Office of Community Food Systems, all of our brilliant guest speakers that we had this week. We'd also like to thank our teammates at New York University, the National Center for Appropriate Technology, and of course, the National Farm to School team. But most importantly, we'd like to thank you all for spending time with us this week. We appreciate all the time and effort from each and every one of you and are excited to see how the Southeast region brings farm to school. So that includes everything we have planned for day 4 and the workshop this week. But if you feel the need to stay and connect with your teams, feel free to use the time that we have allotted right now for additional breakout sessions to work on your Jamboards or go through some of the curriculum materials that you have right now. So what I think we'll do is we'll open the breakout sessions once again, and feel free to jump into those and utilize them as you will, or if not, no worries. Just have a great weekend, and thank you so much
Hey,
for being.
Thomas, I
Yes.
think I see a hand raised by Jeannie. I just wanted to make sure to honor that and
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I did not see that. Go ahead, Jeannie. Mhm.
So I know that first of all, this training, just the compilation of all the resources and the thought that's gone into it, I think is just incredible. The one thing I mentioned in my group, and it came up, I think, when and I don't remember if it was Kentucky, but someone said it about just, we've shifted to this kind of virtual world over the last year. A lot of the trainings that the family nutrition program has been providing over the last year have been virtual, or we've partnered with organizations that have provided like trainings through videos, and then we would provide the technical support. So I'm saying all this because I know one of the last pieces we talked about is the evaluation. And I just wanted to kind of throw out there like an encouragement to maybe look at best practices around how we all can kind of meet the challenge of what the pandemic has provided to us, and the opportunity that we have to actually reach more people through this virtual world, and how we can do that in an effective manner. I think from my perspective, at least, I think that would be a really helpful kind of nugget for us to be able to know about and like stay connected around if other people are doing that type of work, like how is it working for them? And that's all I just wanted to say. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeannie, for highlighting that and sort of uplifting that. That's certainly something us as a project team are navigating as we are going through this year with all of these trainings. So it's certainly something that's on our mind and can be included in some of the additional materials and suggestions, and just our attempts to kind of keep in touch with all attendees following each regional workshop. We can provide suggestions and tips on how to do outreach and get participation within your state in a virtual context as well as an in-person context. And yeah, I think the idea of uplifting other examples of virtual or in-person safely would be really beneficial for all the attendees and for all of these workshops. So thank you for that. And yeah, again, I mean, if there's anything anyone else would like to share right now, go ahead. Well, thank you for all of the reviews. Again, feel free to jump into your evaluations. And then I think we are going to be opening up the breakout sessions once again. So if you would like and benefit from some more time with your team, go ahead and jump in. Are we going to open that up now, Tracy? Great. Thanks so much, folks. Have a great weekend.